former Vice President and now 2020 presidential candidate Joe Biden, who is a globalist, recently stated that if elected on day one as president, he would rejoin the United States to the Paris Climate Accord, which, according to him, that him and Barack Obama put together. We will discuss the prophetic implications of that statement on today's edition of End of the Age. Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dave Robbins with Endtime Ministries. Thank you for joining me on this edition of End of the Age. I have a prayer request for everybody. Irvin Baxter, his throat is still messed up. He was on the air Friday, open line, and then he went out of town over the weekend. He came back, and he can barely talk. I mean, he's real rough right now. So if you guys will help me pray for him, we need God to heal him and heal his throat. Very, very important. So remember him in your prayers. On today's program, I'm going to be talking about Vice Presidential candidate Presidential candidate Joe Biden, ex-Vice President under Barack Obama. And the Daily Mail reported that Joe Biden says that he would spend $5 trillion to fight global warming and go well beyond what he and Obama did by reversing the Trump's tax cuts to pay for a drastic action. Now, get that clear. He's going to reverse Trump's tax cuts. And he said because he's going to, with an enforcement in place by the end of his term to fight climate change. So Biden announced that in his plan in a video. So he said he's going to fight climate change with a $5 trillion plan. So how's he going to do it? Well, Biden said that he would bring back, part of what he's going to do is to bring the United States participation in the Paris Climate Accord. You remember Donald Trump pulled us out of that. He said that day one, as president, that he would join the Paris Climate Accord, which him and Barack Obama supposedly put together. Now, early in the Obama administration, the House pushed through a tough climate change measure based on a cap-and-trade system, which is wealth redistribution. You understand, right from the get-go. They say that carbon emissions that mankind is putting off are warming the planet, and that they would put caps on the amount of carbon that a factory could emit. And if they went over that, then they could buy certain credits or different things, but it wouldn't help the carbon emissions and global warming anything, but what it would do is redistribute wealth. Now, that's what cap and trade is all about. But at that time, it died in the Senate. Well, Joe Biden says that in his campaign that he also released a video that includes dramatic footage of droughts and fires and melting ice caps. And he says that science tells us how that we act or fail to act if we act or fail to act in the next 12 years, that it will determine the very livability of our planet. And that's why Joe Biden is calling for a clean energy revolution to confront the crisis and do what America does best, solve big problems with big ideas. Biden's outline tracks along some of the ideas of the Green New Deal pushed by Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and many other Democrats in Washington. So he's going with the flow, really, of what's coming from the United Nations and this global warming climate change propaganda. And his outline is also similar in size and scope to what another Democratic presidential candidate, Beto O'Rourke, has proposed. Now, if you remember, President Donald Trump pulled us out of the Paris Climate Accord because he knows full well that the United Nations propaganda of man-made global warming, which leads to climate change, is a complete hoax. It's all propaganda. Donald Trump knows that. So when he got in office, he realized it was a big wealth redistribution scheme, so he pulled us out. Well, the Paris Climate Agreement and this global warming, man-made global warming climate change hoax, it's designed to redistribute the wealth of the world by a global governing system. Donald Trump realized that. And the Paris Climate Agreement, just to make sure you understand the gravity of what Joe Biden said, the Paris Climate Accord is a commitment from every nation to curb their greenhouse gas emissions in an effort to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, which is the United States blueprint for global governance in the earth. So, you remember earlier I made the statement that Joe Biden is a globalist? Well, when we get back from the break, I'm going to tell you how I know that he's a globalist. And so it's very important because he said on day one of my presidency, I'm going to re-sign the United States onto the Paris Climate Accord, committing us to help fulfill the Sustainable Development Goals.
We've seen Bible prophecy fulfilled like never before. From the halls of the United Nations to the Temple Mount in Jerusalem, Endtime Ministries continues to reveal the Bible prophecy in the news headlines around the world every day. Whether it's through our broadcast or online at our Jerusalem Prophecy College, your gifts enable us to put vital materials in the hands of those who need it most. Because of you, we continue to replace fear with faith in the hearts of Christians around the world. We will continue to see prophecy come to pass at an even swifter pace. We need your support. Your donation of any amount enables us to continue to broadcast and be a voice in the ever-growing censored media. To become a partner or give a one-time gift, visit endtime.com or call 1-800-END-TIME right now. That's 800-363-8463. Go online now. Visit endtime.com.
Have you had a longing to visit the cities where Jesus healed, ministered, and taught every day? Judy and I would like to invite you to travel to the wonderful land of Israel. Experience the Word of God in vivid color while walking down the roads of the Holy Land with us.
When you are ready to experience Israel, we recommend you travel with Endtime Ministries. You will not only experience historical and present-day Israel, you will also learn about the prophesied future to come. It's as if we traveled back in time to visit a different era and discovered ourselves in an ancient time. The tour is very well organized, the accommodations are first class, and the food is delicious. If you have ever had a desire to visit Israel, there is no better time than now. Anne from Colorado.
To sign up to receive your Experience Israel 2019 packet, call Adrian or Jana at 1-800-ENDTIME or go to endtime.com. We can't wait to experience Israel with you.
So it's important that we understand, I called Joe Biden a globalist. What is a globalist? Well, a globalist is a person that believes we should move away from the nation state and have a global government. We should have a global state that answers to a world government. That's Joe Biden. He's a globalist. I'm going to tell you how I know that in just a second. He was vice president under Barack Obama, who was a globalist, believed in a world government. He signed us on to the Sustainable Development Goals, and he signed us into the Paris Climate Agreement. Hillary Clinton, a globalist. Bill Clinton, a globalist. They all believe in a world government. So my question to you today is, and I'm going to get to the prophecies here in just a moment, but my question to you today is, there's an election coming up. According to many of the polls, Joe Biden is leading the Democrats. And Is that the kind, what kind of America do we want? Do we want a president who believes in a world government, believes in doing away with our borders, yielding up our sovereignty to a world governing body? You got to ask yourself that question, because remember, he said, day one, I'm going to sign the United States and place us back into the Paris Climate Accord. Commitments to fulfill the goals of part of the Sustainable Development Goals, the United Nations blueprint for global government in the earth. So you ask the question, well, how do you know that Joe Biden is a globalist? Well, if you remember his last major speech as vice president at the World Economic Forum, Joe Biden said this, and I'm going to quote just a few excerpts from that speech. You understand the term world government, New World Order, liberal international order, they're all synonymous terms. It's the same exact thing, but just different names. So in his last speech, just prior to Donald Trump taking office in January of 2017, Joe Biden gave this speech, and I want you to hear a few excerpts from this speech. He's defending the liberal international order because they realize who's fixing to take office, and they're saying that, hey, we need to defend this, even though there's isolationists and nationalists coming into power in the world. We've got to defend what we've worked 70 years to build. So listen to a few excerpts of Vice President Joe Biden's speech at the time. He said, for the past 7 decades, now what he's talking about is the establishment of the United Nations after World War II. He says, for the past 7 decades, the choices that we have made, particularly the United States and our allies in Europe, have steered our world down a clear path. After World War II, we drew a line under centuries of conflict and took steps to bend the arc of history in a more just direction. Instead of resigning ourselves to ceaseless wars, we built institutions and alliances to advance our shared security. Our careful attention to building and sustaining a liberal international order or a world government with the United States and Europe at its core was the bedrock of the success the world enjoyed in the second half of the 20th century. Let me ask you a question. How successful has the United Nations been in stopping war? Now, that was the goal, right? Stop war. At least that's what we were told. But there have been wars ever since. So the United Nations at this point seems to be a paper tiger, right? Well, that's not exactly what it was designed to do. It was designed to be a communistic one world government. And they got the nations of the world to buy in because they said, hey, rather than going to war against each other, you can just come here to the General Assembly and we'll talk out our conflicts and we'll talk them out, we'll reason amongst each other, we won't have any more war. How has that worked? Didn't work in Vietnam or the Korean War or look at all the conflict in the Middle East. It hasn't worked there. So why hasn't it worked? Because that's not what their goal was to begin with. But continuing on Joe Biden's speech, he said, but in recent years, it has become evident that the consensus upholding this system is facing incredible and increasing pressures from both within and without. He says, today I'd like to speak to the sources of those pressures and about why it's imperative that we act urgently to defend the liberal international order or the world government. That's what you're trying to create. These are the pressures that are undermining support for the liberal international order from inside. Popular movements on both the left and the right have demonstrated a dangerous willingness to revert to political small-mindedness, to the same nationalist, i.e. Donald Trump, protectionist, and isolationist agendas that led the world to consume itself in war during the last century. He says this is a politics at odds with our values and with the vision that built and sustains the liberal international order. The impulse to hunker down, to shut the gates, to build walls, that's a personal affront to Donald Trump, and exit at this moment at precisely the wrong answer. It offers a false sense of security in an interconnected world. We need to tap into the big-heartedness that conceived a Marshall Plan, the foresight that planned a Bretton Woods, and the audacity that proposed a United Nations, all institutions, I might add, to govern the world. He says, rather, this is the moment to lead boldly and recommit ourselves, our common principles, which remain essential to my nation and the liberal democracies the world over. He says the United States has not always been the perfect guardian of our order or our world order. We've not always lived up to our own values, and some of our past missteps provided fodder for the force of liberalism. But he says, President Obama and I have worked consistently over the past 8 years to lead not only by example of our power, but by the power of our example. The United States and Europe must lead the fight to defend those values that have brought us to where we are today. Fight the urge to embrace isolationism and protectionism, defending the liberal international order. When I say that, he's saying defending the world government we're trying to create. He said it requires that we resist the forces of European disintegration and maintain our long-standing insistence on a Europe whole, free, and at peace. Now, you understand, he's saying, hey, folks, there are people in the world, i.e. Donald Trump, who's coming into office a few days after President Obama and Joe Biden go off into civilian life. And he's saying there are people, and there are people in Europe. You understand the last election that was just held there, and a huge surge in nationalist ideologies in the EU. And they're saying that these people, they're going against a world government that we're trying to create. We've got to do everything we can to protect that. We've taken us 7 decades to get to where we are now, and we've got to protect that. That was his last speech as vice president. So, is Vice President Joe Biden at that time, now a 2020 presidential candidate, is he a globalist? Absolutely. And he said, day one, when I get in office, I'm going to put the United States back into the Paris Climate Accord. In other words, what Donald Trump has done to remove us from the world government and their tentacles, I'm going to start putting us back in to the world government. Now, the Bible prophesies a world government will be formed just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ, and the Antichrist will rule over that world government. Well, that world government is established and in operation as we speak. But the Bible says America will not be part of that world governing body. Now, during the Obama administration, Irvin, Baxter, myself, many of us, we had conversations about this because we saw us headed straight into the world government. But because of what we know about Bible prophecy, we knew that the United States was not part of that. That we, in the end, we would pull out of that and stand with Israel all the way to the end. So during the Clinton administration, both Bushes, father and son, the Obama administration, we're sitting there looking at this going, we're headed right straight into a world government. They're yielding up our sovereignties. A lot of different things are happening. How is this going to play out? Well, of course, then Donald Trump came along and he started talking against the process of globalization or the move towards a world government. And then, of course, now that he's been in office, he started pulling us out of that. Well, all of that is prophesied in Scripture. So let's talk about America's prophesied exit from world government. Because you say, what's the future going to hold? Well, the question is, will we elect somebody like a Joe Biden who believes in a world government? That's the big question. What kind of United States do you want to live in? Do you want to remove our borders and yield our sovereignty up to a world governing body? Or do you want to have America first? We stand with Israel all the way to the end. We help other countries, but we don't unite with them and have a world government that lords over us. Eventually, we'll be ruled by an antichrist. So, let's talk about the world government. For years, global elites, people above Joe Biden and a President Barack Obama, these people, most of them you don't know their name. Global elites, they've been for decades working assiduously to create a world government. The Bible prophesies that this is what's going to happen. The goal is a global governing system so all-inclusive and so minutely detailed that it could control all aspects of every person's life on the planet. And the intentions is to eventually regulate all individual production and consumption patterns. This is part of the Sustainable Development Goals, with the ultimate objective of thought manipulation resulting in an absolute obedience and allegiance. That's what they want. They don't really care about if they fund both sides of a war and they're making money off of it. They don't care of the casualties. They don't care about that. They don't care about a person's life per se. All they care about is being able to control it. And the outcome of these efforts is the formation of international institutions specifically designed to govern the world. Vice President at that time, Joe Biden, mentioned them in his speech, i.e., one of the main ones is the United Nations. So these would include many recognizable organizations that you would recognize. Again, the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, the International Criminal Court, the World Bank, the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO in Europe, just to name a few. Those organizations were specifically created to govern the planet. And the United Nations is the seat of that world government. Back in 2012, I've used this many times in my Bible study because a lot of people, we started a church in New York City. Many of you know about it, right in Midtown Manhattan, 2 blocks from Times Square. I had a couple ladies in the Bible study. One of them, I think, worked in the bookstore at the United Nations. I started telling her what the Bible says about world government and that what the United Nations was really created to do. And she said, I work there. I'm there almost every day, and I didn't realize this. And she said, you've got me not wanting to go back. And so I said, it's very real. So in 2012, Fenn Olser-Hampson, Paul Heimbecker, and Gordon Smith of the Ontario-based Center for International Governance Innovation, they contributed to their thoughts about the role of the United Nations and the future of global governance in a feature of the Council on Foreign Relations, the Council of Councils, in their initiative. This is what they said, and I'm going to quote. They said, as we adapt to emerging global threats, let's not lose sight of what we have achieved. The United Nations has largely fulfilled the chartered goals established in San Francisco 70 plus years ago now. And you realize what they're talking about is the United Nations Charter, which was penned by Alger Hiss, who was a convicted communist spy. But they're saying, hey, we've achieved much of that already. And in doing so, we have spawned an extensive body of international laws, treaties, norms and practices, and institutions, I just named several of them a minute ago, that govern most facets of interstate relations. With these applications, the United Nations Charter has become the world's central operating system, the motherboard of global governance. These people know exactly what they're trying to do, folks. It's the plan to govern the world and its citizens, and it's progressing very rapidly. Now, let's talk about the New World Order or the liberal international order, exactly what Vice President Joe Biden, again, at that time, this was early 2017, just I think a few days before Donald Trump was inaugurated, he said after World War II, this wasn't in his speech, but what's happened was after World War II, the United States led the efforts to create a new world order or a liberal international order. And for the last 7+ decades, we have been one of the principal drivers of that world governing system because we had leaders here in the United States that were globalist. We still have leaders here that are globalist. Thankfully, I don't see Donald Trump as one of those. He's been pulling us out of that. And every administration since the founding of the United Nations, whether they were Republican or Democrat, they fully supported the New World Order, i.e. George H.W. Bush. He started talking about the New World Order. He was supportive of that. And then, of course, Bill Clinton, President Obama, on down the line. They supported a world government. You say, well, I don't know about this president. I don't know about that one. At the end of their presidency, had they pulled us out of the United Nations? No, they hadn't. It had always progressed all the way down the line. And they knew it had progressed. That's what Joe Biden was talking about. So they were wielding, all the way down through time, they had wielded vast amounts of international power, along with the other 4 victor nations. This was after World War II, the other 4 victor nations of World War II. And you know that China, France, Russia, and the United Kingdom, and the United States, they were the 5 victor nations of World War II. Now, when we get back from the break, I'll talk about our position on the UN Security Council and how it's going to play out in the prophecies of the Bible.
Move Mountains with Irvin Baxter. This book by Irvin's grandson provides 30 days of devotion that will enhance your relationship with God and others. Authentic illustrations from early morning devotions at Endtime will help you find your purpose and eliminate fears. Commit to taking this 30-day journey and experience real life change. Get your book for only $14.99. Call 1-800-363-8463 or go to endtime.com/move.
If ever people needed to hear the unvarnished truth, it is now. There are some subjects that are not politically correct to talk about, but they're urgent. That's why I'm grateful for Endtime magazine. If you're not a subscriber, you're missing information that will impact your life. Endtime has a bi-monthly magazine that explains how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. You can get a 2-year subscription for only $29. You can also get a bulk subscription and pass them out to your church. We have gotten reports that Endtime magazine has caused spiritual awakenings in churches when they see the prophecies being fulfilled right now. You can start your own ministry and lead them in doctor's offices, libraries, laundromats. You never know if you might be responsible for saving someone who is searching for the unvarnished truth. That's what the magazine has done in many lives. Call 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 and get your subscription today.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the archive button.
So at the helm of the United Nations is the UN Security Council. They wield the power, the 5 victor nations of World War II. And the United Nations Security Council, they have the veto power over any Security Council resolution. And since we forged this global governing system, the United States has also put our money where our mouth is. In 2016, the United States remained the largest donor of the United Nations. We contributed more than $10 billion, roughly 1/5 of its collective budget. And the United States also funds the largest percentage of the NATO members, basically the United Nations global military arm, of their budget at 22.144%. So needless to say, the United States is intricately involved in the establishment of a world governing system. And over the last 70 plus years, the world has looked to America for leadership in the implementation of the New World Order agenda. Until recently, we've been the leader of, if not just the United Nations or NATO, but of all the multilateral, the world governing institutions designed to govern the world. However, the Bible prophesies a completely different political atmosphere in the end time. And this is what we've been watching all along, because we knew what the prophecies said, and we knew what was going on politically. And we were wondering, how's all this going to break? Well, we've watched it over the last couple of years. According to the prophecies, there will be a world government. We know that. It's going to be established just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. But here's the key. The United States will not be in full compliance with its agenda. That's very important for you and me. That's why I'm saying in the future, would you want to elect somebody who wants to be a part of that world government? So let's talk about the world government in prophecy. 650 years prior to John writing the book of Revelation, the prophet Daniel was given a vision of 4 beasts that represented kingdoms or nations that would exist at the second coming of Jesus Christ. The 4 beasts were described in Daniel 7, 4 through 7, and those modern nations that they symbolize are a lion with eagle's wings, which is Great Britain and the United States, a bear, which is Russia, a 4-headed leopard, which is Germany, and a 10-horned beast, which symbolize the reborn Holy Roman Empire or the current European Union. In the book of Revelation, John uses these exact same symbols of nations to describe the end-time world government. In John's account, the 4 separate nations of Daniel 7, they have federalized into one large global governing body or a world government. And the interpretation of these scriptures goes as this. Now, this is Revelation 13. John said, I saw upon the sand of the sea, and I saw a beast rise up out of the sea, one singular beast, having 7 heads and 10 horns. And upon his horns, which would symbolize the European Union, were 10 crowns. And upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, Germany. And his feet were the feet of the bear, Russia. Mouth, the mouth of the lion, Great Britain. And the dragon, or Satan, gave this entity its seat, power, and its great authority. That's Revelation 13, 1 through 2. So this is a 2,000-year-old prophecy of a world government that's the world government that's currently being established. But you say, well, hold on, Dave, you guys said the United States is missing. Well, if you remember back in Daniel 7, the eagle's wings, symbolic of the United States back in Daniel 7, they're not mentioned in that federalized beast of Revelation 13. And this indicates that the United States will not be included in the world government in the end time. The Bible actually says in Revelation 12 that we will stand with and protect Israel against the world government in the end time. So the prophecy also indicates that world dominance will have shifted from the United States to the powers in Europe. Now, I said up until this point, the United States has been the principal driver behind the efforts for a world government. But the Bible specifically says that Europe will be the power base of the Antichrist, not the United States. And that we could go through all those prophecies. It would take me a few hours. I'm not going to do that today. But we know from the prophecies that this is going to be the case. Well, we can watch this happening as we speak. If you follow the news, you understand that the United States' role as the world leader is kind of diminishing, and Europe is coming into power. So this scenario, it left, because we understood the prophecies of the Bible, it left us with a few questions. Since we were presently the leader of the world government, how would such a shift of power occur? Will the United States be wiped out in World War III? We know that's one of the next prophecies to occur. Or will we be brought to our knees and become a non-factor on the world stage after World War III? Or, on the other hand, could we perhaps go into isolation and just be a light to the world in the end time? We didn't really know early on. But there is a scripture that helps answer these questions. It's Revelation chapter 12. And it's the only other place that the eagle's wings are mentioned in the prophecies of the end time. Revelation chapter 12, verse 13 says that the dragon, when there's a war in heaven in Revelation 12, Satan is bound to the earth. And the Bible says, woe to the inhabitants of the earth, because Satan comes down unto you having great wrath. The tribulation period is the wrath of Satan. Well, in Revelation 12, verse 13, the Bible says the dragon, or Satan, will persecute a woman with 12 stars around her head in Revelation 12. Well, the woman is Israel, and the 12 stars symbolize the 12 tribes of Israel. And according to Revelation 13, the dragon is Satan, and he will use the Antichrist in the world governing system to do the persecuting. And then John tells us in Revelation 12:14 that Israel will be protected during the Great Tribulation, which will occur during the final 3.5 years immediately preceding the second coming. It says, and to the woman, Israel, were given 2 wings of a great eagle, the United States, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, times, and half a time, from the face of the serpent. And this is Revelation 12:14. So a clear understanding of Revelation 12 and Revelation 13, these have allowed us to be absolutely sure of 2 things. The United States will stand with Israel and protect Israel from the world government in the end time. And 2, the United States will not be part of the world government and therefore will not come under the full reign of the Antichrist. Now, are you thankful for that? Come on, I am. If I was in church, I'd be shouting right now. So let's talk about America's exit from that, because that's what we're interested in. And Donald Trump has been pulling us out of that for the last 2 years, 2.5 years now. However, this is why I wanted to bring the statement that 2020 presidential candidate Joe Biden, who is leading in many polls in the Democratic ranks, that this is why I wanted to bring this to you today, because he said the first day of my presidency, should he become elected, he would put us back in the Paris Climate Accord. So Donald Trump's been pulling us out. Joe Biden, who is a globalist, believes in a world government, he would make efforts to put us back in. And it's something that we do not want. If you really understand the prophecies and understanding what's going on with the world government, we want nothing to do with that, because the Antichrist will eventually usurp authority over that. And who gives that entity its seat, power, and great authority? According to Revelation 13:2, Satan, or the dragon. He's behind the efforts to establish a world government in the earth today. So, America's exit. Like I said, from the signing of the United Nations Charter in 1945, at the end of World War II, until the 2016 presidential election, it was clear that the United States was in full compliance with the world governing system. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, he had put Novus Ordo Seclorum on our $1 bill in the ribbon under the pyramid with the all-seeing eye. He was a one-worlder. He put New World Order on our dollar bill. So this didn't start happening yesterday. It's been happening for decades. So we were the principal driver for years. And over the course of time, some presidents, they proceeded cautiously, while others, they just blundered forward. Like drunken on the dreams of a fully functioning world governing system. They were all in. But no matter who was in office, at the end of their administration, we still seemed headed in the same direction, marching straight forward in yielding up more and more sovereignty of the United States to this world governing body. However, knowing the prophecies of the Bible, they foretell America's absence from the world governing system and the rate at which end-time prophecy is being fulfilled. We knew that Washington's political atmosphere, it had to change at some point, because we were the leader of the world government, and we said, the Bible says we're not going to be part of it. So how would that transition take place? Well, the number one issue by far in the 2016 presidential campaign was globalism. Many people didn't realize what globalism was. Globalism is simply the belief that the nation state is now obsolete and that the world must move into a system of global governance, or remove, to clearly state it, that globalists believe, and like I said, this is what Joe Biden believes, that national borders should be dissolved and a one world government should be instituted, the creation of a global state that answers to a world government. So going into the 2016 election, we knew that Hillary Clinton advocated globalism. Under the Obama administration, the United States was pursuing the policy of globalism. Again, he signed us on to the Sustainable Development Goals. He signed us on to the Paris Climate Accord. And President Obama, he was a big proponent of the emerging system of global governance. He threw America's borders wide open. I mean, look at all the people that came in, and he refused to enforce our immigration laws. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton promised to continue the globalist policies of Barack Obama. And Joe Biden is going to do the same thing if he got in office. I mean, he was Barack Obama's vice president, everybody. But on the other hand, at that point, this was during the election campaign, Donald Trump, he strongly opposed globalization. He said it in many of his speeches, and he opposed open borders. So he was flying right in the face of the political ideologies of the international community. He wanted to control our borders and to restore American sovereignty. Started talking about building a wall. And so Irvin, Baxter, myself, we started going, oh, here we go. Because could this be the transition of the United States out of the world government? And over the last about 2.5 years now, Donald Trump has pulled us out. But Joe Biden made this statement wanting to put us back in.
Many Christians admit end-time Bible prophecy is very complex and difficult to understand, and for some, a little bit scary. But what if you could understand Bible prophecy? What if you could know what will happen and how the United States will play a key role during end-time events? When you call today and get Understanding the End Time DVD curriculum, you can have peace about what is to come while understanding the prophetic events that appear in our headlines every day. When you call or go online to endtime.com and order, you'll learn the answer to the biggest prophecy question of all. Will the rapture take place, and when will it happen? This 14-part DVD series is the definitive end-time prophecy Bible study available. And for this limited time, you can get it for just $149. Don't miss this special offer. Understanding the End Time. Call now. 1-800-363-8463. That's 1-800-END-TIME. Or go to endtime.com today.
So when we saw this transition start to take place, of course, we had heard many of Trump's speeches as a presidential candidate. And then when he came into office and we started seeing some of the things, I mean, he started immediately trying to unravel the tape that held us to this world governing body. He started pulling us out. We had many conversations and thinking, man, this could be it. Because understanding the prophecies of America's secession from the ongoing process of globalization and the further enslavement, and that's really what it was, of the world government, we sat back and we thought, you know, President Trump, could he be the one to bring about our exit? However, when is the last time a presidential candidate we thought he'd actually kept his campaign promises? I mean, you know, you had to have asked yourself that as well. Donald Trump was promising all kinds of stuff, but at the end of the day, what would happen when he got in office? He didn't have a track record we could go on. So we thought, you know, could this be it? But, you know, I mean, he's a real estate developer. We didn't know what he believed, really, but he was promising a lot of stuff. So it does seem like that he's at least, over the last 2.5 years, he made a serious effort to keep his promises that he did while he was on the campaign trail. And if you remember, in his first speech at the United Nations, President Trump vowed to put America first when he stated that the greatest words in the United States Constitution are its first 3 beautiful words, we the people. He said, generations of Americans have sacrificed to maintain the promise of those words, we the people, the promise of our country, of our great history. And he said, in America, the people govern, the people rule, and the people are sovereign. Now, prior to President Trump being elected, did you feel like you were in control, or that you governed, or that you ruled anything, and that you were really sovereign? Donald Trump said, I was elected not to take power, but to give power back to the American people where it belongs. He said, in foreign affairs, we are renewing this founding principle of sovereignty. He said, our government's first duty is to its people, to our citizens, to serve their needs, to ensure their safety, and to preserve their rights, and to defend their values. And he said, as President of the United States, I will always put America first. Now, he's given a speech at the United Nations, which is the exact opposite of that. They're all about doing away with the nation state and a world government having the power. Donald Trump said, as long as I'm President of the United States, I'm going to put America first. It's the America first policy of Donald Trump. So, the question was, did President Trump actually mean what he said about globalization or the process of becoming further entrenched in the global governing system? Well, he went on to say that he would no longer surrender this country or its people to the false song of globalism. He said, I'm skeptical of international unions that tie us up and bring down America. And he said, under my administration, we will never enter America into any agreement that reduces our ability to control our own affairs. The nation state remains the true foundation of happiness and harmony. Now, those were the words of Donald Trump in his address to the United Nations. So, now you know what Donald Trump is fighting. The international community, the establishment here in the United States, they're all about a world government. Then a guy gets elected and says, we're not going to conform. We're going to run our own country. We're not going to have any foreign powers telling us what to do. So you understand why they demonize him on every front. They try to demonize him. They demonize his family because he is against the world government. He's against the establishment. Now, I want you to consider some of President Trump's efforts, one in particular, in his secession plan. And, you know, whether it's a rebuke of a global governing system. I mean, when he stood in front of the United Nations and started hammering down on socialism, we sat back and thought, well, the United Nations is socialistic. And yet he's coming in there and saying, socialism has never worked. I was cheering Because socialism is a very, very bad thing. I know from the prophecies of the Bible that the Antichrist global governing system will be socialistic. I don't want anything to do with socialism here in the United States because I don't want to conform to the Antichrist world government. So whether it's a rebuke of a global governing system or a complete withdrawal from an enslaving treaty, Donald Trump is working his plan to put America first and not the world government. One of the things that he did, which is very important to today's topic, because remember, Joe Biden said that the first day that I'm elected president, I will put us back in the Paris Climate Agreement. Donald Trump pulled us out of that. So let me make sure you understand what the Paris Climate Agreement was all about. And Donald Trump's, why it was so important that he withdrew us from that. The Paris Climate Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals, which are a blueprint of global governance in the world from the United Nations, they are twin efforts, and they're designed specifically to govern the entire planet, you and me. So one without the other, it's really pointless. The Sustainable Development Goals, they were unanimously adopted by all 193 members of the United Nations back in September 2015. That was one of the main reasons that the Pope Francis put out his encyclical in June of 2015, because he was promoting the climate was a lot of what the Sustainable Development Goals were promoted to do, because it's wealth redistribution. So the Sustainable Development Goals, and then later on in December of that year, the Paris Climate Accord, the encyclical was put out on purpose just prior to that to help those things get pushed through. So the Sustainable Development Goals, it's the United Nations Global Governing Plan. It's part of that, and it's called the Transforming Our World, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It's a blueprint for global governance. For you and me, they want to control what we do. According to the United Nations' own website, the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and 169 associated targets with those goals, they demonstrate the scale and ambition of a new universal agenda. The Sustainable Development Goals are an effort by the United Nations to control every single aspect of a person's life on the planet. They want to control how much electricity you use, what kind of food you eat, the amount of times you flush the toilet. I mean, they want to control everything. And one of the main areas of critical importance is the planet itself. According to the 2030 Agenda, it states, we are determined to protect the planet from degradation, including through sustainable consumption, how much you as an American citizen consume, and production, what you produce, how you produce it. Does it meet with international law? That's what they want to do. And sustainably managing its natural resources and taking urgent action on climate change, which is a hoax. I don't have time today to prove this. Irvin, Baxter, myself, we proved it many times, but you understand early on it was global warming. And when it was snowing and we were having all these polar vortexes and all these things, and they said, we can't prove global warming because the earth wasn't warming, so now we're going to change it to climate change. Because that way, now they went away from climate change and it's weather extremes. Because they can say anything that comes along. I mean, yesterday here in Dallas, we had what was called a rain bomb. You look on many places, look up the Dallas rain bomb. This huge cloud come right over Dallas and then boom, dropped all its rain at one time. We had a crane collapse here in Dallas and it killed a person. So I promise you that there are people saying, well, because of human-induced global warming, which leads to climate change, that's what produced that rain bomb. The fact of the matter is human-induced global warming, which leads to climate change, is a hoax. So, they said that we need to take urgent action on climate change so that it can support the needs of the present and future generations. Moving on. This is the reason for the Paris Climate Agreement. Without a commitment from every nation to curb their greenhouse gas emissions, it's impossible to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. And on January 18th, 2016, during the opening remarks to Abu Dhabi and the Action Day, then the UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon, he said that the Paris Climate Agreement was adopted just after the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, and these are twin plans for transformative progress. Sustainable Development Goals are the vision, climate change is the commitment. And this vision and commitment go hand in hand, and they're part of our grand design. These should complement each other. If we don't implement the climate change agreement, the Paris Climate Agreement, all these 17 goals will not be fully implemented. And now you can understand the importance of Donald Trump's withdrawal from the Paris Climate Agreement. Back on June 1st of 2017, Donald Trump said, therefore, in order to fulfill my solemn duty to protect America and its citizens, the United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord. And as of today, the United States will cease all implementation of the non-binding Paris Accord and the draconian financial and economic burdens that the agreement imposes on the United States. Remember that statement. And this includes ending the implementation of the nationally determined contribution, and which I'm talking about billions of dollars. Very importantly, the Green Climate Fund, which is costing the United States a vast fortune. Now, Donald Trump knew exactly what was going on, that it was a wealth redistribution scheme, the Paris Climate Accord, and the Sustainable Development Goals. So he said, you know what? Because I'm putting America first, I'm pulling us out of the Paris Climate Accord because it's a wealth redistribution scheme. He knew it. He knew that human-induced global warming, which leads to climate change, is a hoax. Donald Trump knows that. So he pulled us out. Joe Biden just recently said, if I get elected, day one, I will put the United States back in the Paris Climate Accord. Why? Because Joe Biden is a globalist. He believes the United States should be in the world governing body, which will eventually be controlled by the Antichrist. I don't want anything to do with that, and I wanted to bring it to your attention today just so you'll know and be prepared for the future.
This has been End of the Age, brought to you by the faithful partners of Endtime Ministries. If you're not currently a partner with Endtime Ministries, or if you would like more information, we invite you to call us at 1-800-ENDTIME. That's 1-800-363-8463, or visit us online at endtime.com.
Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel and like our Facebook page.